everyone from the center. I'm Carolyn Merrick, program coordinator here, and with us today is Scott Karr, the owner of the Charlottesville Wild Birds Unlimited, here to talk to us about hummingbirds and other seasonal birds, even though that wasn't mentioned in the blurb. So hope that's enjoyable to you as well. And a couple things before we get started. I just want to thank Scott for his, I don't know what the word is, stewardship of the center. He's donated lots of things, finances, and also bird feeders. So when you come to the center, you'll see some bluebirds out back, thanks to Scott and his bird feeder and his excellent bird seed. And then also, as you might know, I'm just going to admit people, here we go. Scott has donated 2 sets of hummingbird, what are we calling them? A feeder and the nectar. So this is $40 worth of wonderful stuff. So once everybody's in, I'm going to write everybody's name down on a sheet of paper, or what's presented here, if it's, you know, whatever your name is on your Zoom. And then we'll do a drawing at the end. So 2 lucky people will receive those gifts. Let's see, everybody's on mute. And so if you have any questions for Scott during the time he's speaking, you can more than welcome to put them in the chat. And when he's finished, we'll get to those questions. Or at the very end, we can see if we can unmute folks and you can ask directly. All right. So thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it over to Scott.
All right. Thank you, Carolyn. It's wonderful to be doing a presentation for the center again. It's been a little while. I'm looking at myself here in the frame and I'm glad that I don't have to do that for too much longer because my head is so very, very shiny. Now, I need to share my screen and we'll get started with the presentation. So, Carolyn.
Yes.
How do I share my screen?
There should be a green button at the bottom if you hover your
okay, okay, hold on. Now I got to go back. Sorry, everybody. I am not super well versed in this. So where is?
So for me underneath, if I take my cursor underneath the frame of where I see you.
There we are. Okay. All right. I found it. Okay. Now. I only cost us a couple minutes. Now I got this thing bouncing up here. I got to get rid of that. And now I can make the screen big. All right, now we're in business. So people can see things?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So as Carolyn mentioned, I own the Wild Birds Unlimited store here in Charlottesville. I bought it in, all right. Okay. That's me. That's what I do. I bought it in May of 2017. We have recently moved, only about 500 yards. So we used to be in a little strip center next to Mattress Warehouse. Now we're in the main shopping center in between Firehouse Subs and the DSW warehouse. So it's we were talking earlier, thrilled to be in my new space and equally thrilled to not be moving anymore. Moving is just, I forgot what a headache it can really be. All right, so now, all right, so for some reason, I'm having some issues with one of my navigation, but I think we're gonna be all right. So today's talk is predominantly about hummingbirds. I am gonna touch on a couple of other things. I don't want anybody to panic because the other stuff is, you know, things that I think are important and also related to questions we're getting in the store, but we'll move through those quickly and we'll be spending the vast majority of our time on the wonderful hummingbird. So just so everybody is prepared, this is the outline. So we're going to talk a little bit about migration in no small part because hummingbirds are migratory here on the East Coast. And it's an important, incredibly important event in general for many, many, many bird species. We're going to just, I call this the spring summer bird sampler. This is mostly just a picture of some of the birds that we'll start seeing and hearing arriving here in Central Virginia before too long. We get a lot of questions this time of year about orioles and bluebirds. I got like one slide on each and we'll move through that real fast, and then hummingbirds. And like I said, that'll be the bulk of our presentation. So you're getting more than you bargained for today, not less. All right, migration. So Carolyn, you can hear me okay and everything?
I can hear you,
Okay.
yes.
All right. So, more than half of the birds that breed in North America are migratory. It's, fun, it's hardwired into the birds. They've been doing it for many years, thousands of years. And it can be triggered by a number of factors or a combination of factors. One of the things that they say is really has a lot to do with it is just the amount of daylight and the positioning of the sun. We get a lot of questions in the store from folks who are concerned that, if they feed the birds, they're going to make lazy birds, and then, they're going to migrate, or they're not going to actually go looking for their natural food sources. And there's not, evidence for this. I mean, the hummingbirds, they always leave, and then they always leave around the same time. And so I don't think that that's something that folks really need to be concerned about. So, migration can cover thousands of miles. Most of our summer visitors are coming from Central and South America, and that includes the ruby-throated hummingbird. That little bird makes an extraordinary trip to come up here to its breeding grounds. And so in spring and summer, we're talking about where the birds go to breed. And then fall and winter, obviously they're not breeding then, they're heading back to generally warmer climes. So, going back to kind of how it's just hardwired into the birds' brains, even first-time migrants will find their way back to wherever they're supposed to be. And, researchers don't understand totally why this is, but, even captive birds will, around the time that they would be migrating, start to demonstrate some agitation. So this is all deeply ingrained in the birds. And as I suggested, navigation is not fully understood, but they believe that they use celestial objects, some landmarks, and the Earth's magnetic field. Interestingly, birds generally migrate at night, and so they're not looking for physical landmarks as much as they would be looking for celestial landmarks. And they migrate at night primarily. If you think about it, there are fewer predators at night. And also, if you're on a super long trip, when you land, you need to be able to visibly look for food and water to rest up for the next trip. If you're if you're migrating during the day, then you're not spending your time getting the calories you need in order to continue your flight home. All right, so a few of our other spring and summer residents, in addition to the ruby-throated hummingbird. So that is the gray catbird. They are very active feeder birds. They are very chatty. They have a tremendous variety of vocalizations, and will also sort of just make up and combine songs. In some ways, it's like a mockingbird in that way, although not quite as prolific. That is a chipping sparrow. It's got that beautiful kind of color, copper color on the top there. Sparrows are predominantly ground feeders, but if you have a tray feeder, they'll go into those sometimes too. That is an indigo bunting, completely unmistakable bird. Interestingly enough, they also like to eat off the ground, and millet is their favorite food. Brown thrasher, this is one that some of you may see, but it's not an uncommon bird. Beautiful, pretty large bird actually. Doesn't go to feeders too much, but again, a big tray style feeder, they would go into one of those. They love water. They love to take bird baths. Wood thrush is a bird that you are more likely to hear than to see. This is the bird, in the spring, when I hear the wood thrush, I really know spring is coming. In the same way, in the fall, when I hear the white-throated sparrows, I know that fall has arrived. That's a phoebe, which is a kind of flycatcher. They're not feeder birds either. They're famous for building nests in absolutely everywhere. They are indiscriminate nest builders and will build them in inconvenient locations, but they're a lovely little bird. So here's a Baltimore Oriole. And as I said, well, I'm just going to go through one slide on Orioles in case anybody's thinking about those. So they don't breed in Central Virginia. They are strictly migratory. So, well, there are always exceptions to rules. So, but by and large, we are too far south and we are not in their breeding territory. The migration is late April through May. So they're nectar eaters in addition to eating fruit, right? So, like the hummingbird. The hummingbird is a nectar eater. The ratio for Oriole nectar is a little bit different. So it's a little bit more diluted. So it's 6 parts water to 1 part sugar. And like I said, sliced oranges, grape jelly, they like that as well. And of course, as with other nectar eaters, bright flowers and fruit-bearing trees are very attracted to them. I get folks coming into the store every year excited about Orioles, and my caution to them is just, it's the likelihood of attracting one is not super high. At the same time, I have to say, every year I have several people who have Orioles that at least stop by and spend some time eating from their feeders. I always put out a feeder, and so far it's been unsuccessful, but I'm an optimistic guy. And so my feeder will be going back out, early April, about the same time as I put out my hummingbird feeder, actually. All right, bluebirds and bluebird boxes. Get a ton of questions about those this time of year. And so, this is one of those times when people really did a fabulous job to benefit nature. So bluebirds were in rapid decline because of habitat loss and some other things. And putting up these boxes has made an enormous difference in the rebound of their population. So bluebird boxes should be mounted about 5 to 6 feet high. It's good to mount them on a pole if you can. A tree is not great. It's a little bit easier for predators. Also, the birds tend to like to have more of an open view. So like not in a tree in the woods. They prefer to have a firm mount, so not something that's hanging from a wire or what have you. Although I've had customers with bluebirds that have nested in hanging boxes as well. Like I said, when you're talking about creatures of the world, they're like birds, there's always going to be exceptions. Like I said, some visibility, open vista, I think that in terms of just safety and also, looking for bugs, having that hole sort of facing more towards an open area. They'll have 2 to 4 broods a season. You need to clean out the nest after each one. Otherwise, it gets higher and higher and higher, and they can run out of room. There's some cleanliness, sanitation questions as well. And then guarding against predators. So black snakes and raccoons love bluebirds and bluebird eggs. So you have to be careful about that. All right, so this is just a picture of a bluebird box that we sell. It's got the predator guard mounted on the front. The snake does not like to drag its belly across those tines on the edge, and it's extremely effective against raccoons. I sell boxes that open from the side because if it opens from the front, it's going to be it's hard to do that with a predator guard on the box. It's just hard. You have to take the guard off every time you want to open the box. All right, so the appetizer is over. Now, let's talk a little bit about hummingbirds. That is a picture of a ruby-throated hummingbird. So they really are, they're extraordinary birds. And I think that, people in the store, they get, of all the birds, when people are coming in, the excitement about the return of the ruby-throated hummingbirds is the biggest one as a whole. People love the bluebirds and people love the goldfinches, but there is just something really remarkable about the hummingbirds that, I don't know, it sparks people's imagination. Folks just get so incredibly excited, and obviously, so do we. So there's a whole bunch of different kinds of hummingbirds. There are over 300 different species. So you're not going to find them in Europe. or Africa. They're limited to the Americas and the Caribbean or Caribbean. So there are 8 species that breed in North America, and I cannot name all of them. Most of them are going to be on the western side of the country and southwest. So here on the East Coast, it's really only the ruby-throated hummingbird that breeds over here. And their distribution area is from the south all the way up into Canada. So they have an enormous distribution area once they have migrated up. There's a picture I'm going to show you later. There's another species of hummingbird that gets spotted in Central Virginia called the rufous hummingbird. It tends to be seen a little bit later in the fall than the ruby throats are, and it's really uncommon. It's like, less common than people see in a Baltimore Oriole. But every year I've got 1 or 2 customers who have a rufous hummingbird show up at their bird feeder. And we'll circle back to that little guy in a minute. So lots of people don't know that hummingbirds are omnivorous. So they eat a lot of insects in addition to eating nectar. Interestingly enough, of course, when they first get up here, there isn't a tremendous amount of food frequently. So one of the things that they'll do is they'll look for places where sapsuckers have been, and they'll go to eat the sugar of the sapsucker, and I think also to look for bugs. So, one of the things that's incredible, I think, just about animals in general and birds in particular, is just the extraordinary different kinds of adaptations that they have, which in general are designed to be able to thrive in a particular environment. And some of these adaptations get to be extremely specific, and other ones are more general. So they are I hope I'm not the only one who wishes that they could use sugar as efficiently as a hummingbird. When I eat it, it just tends to turn to flab, but hummingbirds turn it into energy. And so they're incredibly efficient of turning sugar into energy. And when you see how quickly their wings flap and how fast they move, you can understand that they need a lot of energy to make it through the day. They have an incredibly high metabolic rate, 200 plus breaths and 1,200 plus heartbeats in a minute. I don't know if that's resting rate or not, but probably. One of the things I think is incredible, and other birds can do this too, they can enter a state of torpor to reduce their breaths and their heartbeats significantly. And this is something that is particularly helpful when it's cold. So chickadees can do this too, though not to the same extent as the hummingbirds can. But if you're a bird, you are trying to get as many calories into you, especially when it's cold, right? So if it's the colder time of the year and there's less food, you're trying to get as many calories into you as you can to make it through the night. And so when hummingbirds come up here, especially if they're heading up further north, remember, there could be some very cold evenings still in the early part of spring. And so by slowing that metabolic rate, they're just not burning as much fuel, right? So you don't want to run out of fuel overnight because you'll die, basically. And so this is a way for them to conserve energy to make it to the next day. So they process a tremendous amount of water in the course of the day and can actually slow their kidney function down in order to help prevent dehydrating. And hummingbirds love water, by the way. I got a slide about this later. So, they're not going to go and sit on the edge of a bird bath and dip like you would see with some of your larger birds. But if you've got bubblers, sometimes they will hover over a bubbler or a mister. They will fly into a mister. There are some videos on YouTube you may have seen with just like hundreds of hummingbirds hovering above these features with multiple bubblers coming out of them. So, if you're a hummingbird and you really need an extraordinary amount of energy to make it through your day and do what you need to do, and then to be able to sleep overnight. Efficiency is also related to the brain. So the hummingbird, the hippocampus, helps with spatial memory and memory. And so hummingbirds will come back to the places where they know the good flowers are. They will know which flowers on a plant are producing particularly well. I read that they can even, they'll even know when it's a good time to go back to a flower because it's had time to generate more nectar. So hummingbirds, like if you put out plants and feeders and are consistent about it year after year, they do remember. And so I think, I have some customers with enormous numbers of hummingbirds. Some of that's a function of where they are. And I think some of it is a function of having feeders out and plants out so that year after year, more and more hummingbirds just know that this is a place to go to get food. And that's all related to memory. So the tongue can lap at an incredibly quick rate, and if you've got a hummingbird feeder where you can kind of see into the bottom of it, you can see the vibrations in that water when their tongues are going in there and lapping up. They don't really lap. I can't go into the description, but they've got like channels that actually help the nectar make it from the tongue into the body. It's a little more complicated, and I'm going to screw it up if I try to explain it. But they don't lap like a dog. Let's put it that way. It's more complicated than that. The other thing to keep in mind, and I have customers who are worried about hummingbirds being able to get to the bottom of a particular feeder. So when you look at the length of the hummingbird's bill, its tongue is equally that length. So they have incredibly long tongues, and they can reach between putting their tip of their bill in and then getting their tongue in. They actually have a very long reach in order to get to nectar, even when it starts to get a little bit lower in the feeder. So obviously they're designed for flight. They have very small legs. You're not going to see a hummingbird walking, and they have fewer feathers than other birds. Hummingbirds will perch, however, obviously. I mean, you may have seen them doing that, but they really are designed to live on the wing. So up to 200 wind beats per second, which is just extraordinary when you think about it. The ruby-throated hummingbird averages 53. I think that higher number is seen predominantly when they're doing their sort of parabolic mating dance, and it's like a U. I've only seen it once, but it's pretty incredible. The male's trying to attract the female, and he's just doing this repeated U shape, up and down and up and down and up and down. So, most birds, their wings are more fixed because they're really only interested in going in one direction and then turning left to right. But obviously hummingbirds can fly forwards, backwards, and hover, and so their wings rotate in accordance with what kind of movement they are trying to accomplish. All right, so I don't have a slide of all 300 different species of hummingbirds, but I did pick out a few of the ones that sort of really stand out. So this is the bee hummingbird. It is the smallest of the hummingbirds. It's found only in Cuba. It is 2.25 inches long. And just as an aside, there's a moth called a hummingbird moth, which would be only a little bit smaller than the bee hummingbird. But we have these hummingbird moths around here. They really do look like little hummingbirds. They're incredibly cool. So this is the giant hummingbird. I love this picture because it looks like a dragon. I mean, this looks like a dragon or a flying dinosaur. So the giant hummingbird is 9 inches long with an 8-inch wingspan. So it's, the size of a robin, pretty widely distributed in the western part of South America. So the sword-billed hummingbird is the only hummingbird whose beak is longer than its body. So the beak, I think, reaches from 3.5 to 4.25 inches long. And this is one of those really specific adaptations. So, I believe that this bird has just sort of co-evolved with one or a few numbers of plants where this length of beak really helps it to get into the flower. The risk with these highly specific adaptations is if for whatever reason, these flowers, these plants were to disappear or to significantly lessen in abundance, that presents a real risk to the survival of to these birds. So the more specific an evolutionary adaptation, in some respects, the more at risk that particular animal is. They're not like crows. I mean, crows could live just about anywhere because of their adaptability and their intelligence. So here is the rufous hummingbird. Beautiful, beautiful coppery color. It's the smallest of the hummingbirds that migrate into North America. It has an extraordinary migratory path because it actually goes all the way up into the Pacific Northwest in Canada from South America. So, I mean, if you think about the size of the bird and the distance of the migration, it's just kind of an incredible thing. And this is the one that I said earlier periodically shows up here just because of the migratory pattern. And I think it shows up late just again because of that. They are small and they are also ferocious. So they will, I mean, anybody who's fed hummingbirds has seen the hummingbirds chasing each other all over the place. The rufous hummingbird is even more aggressive than the ruby-throated hummingbird. All right, speaking of which, here again is the male ruby-throated hummingbird. That's the telltale marking underneath. The female does not have that. And the other thing that is true, and here's a picture of the female just is kind of this greenish color on the back. So, and sometimes that one is looking pretty white on the front, sometimes a little bit greenish on the front as well. One thing that is also true is that the juvenile ruby-throated hummingbirds, whether they're male or female, look like the female. So we will have people come into the store and say, I just can't believe how many female hummingbirds I have, and I don't have any male hummingbirds. If, that's after, once the breeding season has begun, that's in all likelihood because the juveniles all look like females. All right, so here are a few general facts about our ruby-throated hummingbird. So as I mentioned before, they spend winters in Central America. They are distributed throughout the eastern half of the US and Canada during their breeding season. They are in abundance. So, I mean, when you think about their migration, that trip across the Gulf of Mexico for a bird that small, I mean, I just get tired thinking about it. It's just absolutely incredible. So every single year in the store, we have people who are concerned that the hummingbirds haven't showed up yet. And so generally, they come in the middle of April and leave in late September. I actually keep my feeders up, all the way through October, just in case there are any late migrants that need a pit stop to fuel on their trip back. And then also, again, because I still want to attract a rufous hummingbird and, they tend to show up a little bit later, not exclusively, but tend to. Last year, I think that it did seem like they showed up a little bit late, but one of the other things that is at play here is, hold on here. So this actually explains that. So the other thing with this whole issue of when hummingbirds arrive and how many are here. So the males get here first. Some of them are scouts. They're just stopping off here to fuel up to go further north. Some of them are going to be taking up residence here, but you only have half of the, one half of the species here in the males. Then the females arrive afterwards. And then, as I mentioned before, there's that long U-shaped mating display that they do. So the birds will have 1 to 2 broods. So they'll nest once or twice. There are some other hummingbirds out west, like the Anna's hummingbird, where the nests are built a little more opportunistically and then lower. So, I mean, there's a video, I think it was either an Anna's or a black-chinned hummingbird that had built a nest on top of a clothesline, right? And so it's very easy to see and watch. Here, the nests tend to be higher and in trees, so you're unlikely to actually see one. And then again, as I said, 1 to 2 broods with 1 to 3 eggs each time. So then you've got the males and the females here, and that still can, not seem like a whole bunch of birds. And then there's the fighting and whatnot. It's later in the summer, once the juveniles are out, that it can really seem like there are a lot more birds. So it can really start so very slowly in terms of them arriving, getting established. And then generally by the end of the summer, my customers are all the folks who've been feeding for a long time. They're awash in hummingbirds. They're thrilled. I will say at my house, I've been putting out my hummingbird feeder for years, and I get 2 a year. I don't know why. Just the way it is, I guess. I love the 2 I get, but that's all I get. So maybe I'll get lucky this year and have some of the juveniles show up. So the eggs are tiny. They are smaller than a jelly bean. And this next picture will give you a sense. So that's a hummingbird nest. And if you look to the left, you will see that's a quarter. It's kind of an old dirty quarter, but that's a quarter. And you can see that there is 1 or 2 birds in that nest. There should be more than one. I think I see 2 heads, but it's a little hard for me to tell. So anyway, that will give you a sense of the size of the nest and the chicks for the ruby-throated hummingbird. All right, on to some practical matters. Attracting hummingbirds. So nectar is 4 parts water, so 1 part plain sugar. Don't use sugar in the raw. Having that refined sugar is actually a good thing. So just like your plain old Domino's refined sugar, 1 part of that to 4 parts water is the proper ratio. If you're using regular sugar from the store, it's a good idea to go ahead and boil the water, get it nice and hot so it dissolves thoroughly, and then obviously let it cool down before you put it out. It's interesting. I have customers every year who come in and they say, I don't know why the hummingbirds won't come to my feeder. I see them around, they're coming to my plants or what have you. And then you ask, well, how long has the nectar been out there? 3-4 weeks, they'll say. And, it's, I guess because it's a liquid, people don't think of it the same way as they think of it as a food, but hummingbird nectar turns. It turns bad. And in the heat of summer, July and August, we're recommending that people swap it out every 2 to 3 days. Now you can buy extenders, preservatives. I sell one. And I also sell hummingbird nectar that has that preservative built into it. In fact, I don't sell any just plain old sugar. I figure you can get that at the grocery store. I only sell the stuff that has the preservative in it. And the preservative in mine is a micronutrient copper. So it's completely and totally safe for the birds. It's not some kind of weird artificial thing. And birds actually get a fair bit of copper in their diet from eating bugs. So it's a great product, and you can use, if you use that, then you can keep your nectar out there, maybe 7 to 10 days. I wouldn't go any longer than that. But it's just really important to keep changing it out. Otherwise, the birds aren't going to come to it. There's a potential you can make them sick, I suppose. There's no need to use food coloring. When I first started feeding hummingbirds, I used food coloring, make it nice and red to attract the birds. But you got to remember, these hummingbirds have extraordinary eyesight. The feeders generally have color on them, frequently red. That's more than enough to attract the birds. So food coloring, it's there's no need for it at all. And, you know, it's unclear whether there's any detrimental effect to the birds at all. I don't know that there have been any studies, but why use something that is not natural and unnecessary? And also just adds another step, you know, you don't want to stain your clothes. It's great always to have the natural food for the birds in addition to your feeders. I'm a huge believer in this, broadly speaking, and the same holds true with hummingbirds. They are particularly attracted to tubular flowers and colors in the orange-red range, but they come to all kinds of flowers. You know, I plant lantana, they love lantana. They come to all kinds of flowering plants. They tulip poplars, they like the flowering portions of the tulip poplar. So but having those plants around are really important. And I will just also say, you know, leaves in your yard, if you know, I'm not saying leave all your leaves in the front yard, but in the parts that nobody sees, think about leaving them down there. That's where next year's bugs are coming from in no small part. And your hummingbirds and your regular birds all want to eat bugs. So from my perspective, I love selling feeders and I love selling bird food and I love helping people to see the birds in their yard. But I think that we can make a real big difference for birds and wildlife, broadly speaking, by planting native plants that are useful, that provide food and shelter for birds and help with bug activity. You know, there's a tremendous decline in natural environments for birds, but those of us who own or rent and have a little plot of land that we are allowed to do something to, if enough of us do that, it can actually make a meaningful difference. Anyway, so that's my soapbox. But this holds true for all of our birds, including our hummingbirds. And as I mentioned before, hummingbirds love water. And I love this picture. So that's a mister that is attached to a bird bath dish. And that mister has to be attached to an actual spigot on the outside of the house with a hose and everything. But hummingbirds will fly right in there and take a drink and get a bath. But like I said before, you can also have bubblers, and they will hover over bubblers and drink from those. And I will confess, even though I'm a huge believer in native plants and I'm doing my best to plant them here, not exclusively. I'm not a purist. You know, there are some beautiful ornamentals, and I think that that's fine too. I'm also not an expert in native plants, but this is what the Google told me that hummingbirds really like. And this is just a sampling of our native plants. There are obviously lots more. You know, I've got bee balm, coral bells. You know, the deer eat the coral bells before they flower so far, so I haven't had any luck with that. But the deer eat just about everything. Anyway, so here's a sample of some native plants. And like I said, there are all kinds of others. And, you know, the hummingbirds will obviously go to non-natives for nectar as well. Butterfly weed is a great native plant. I have a butterfly bush in addition to butterfly weed. They love the butterfly bush as well. All right, feeders. You know, the design of hummingbird feeders is important. It is the same way as the design of feeders that you put birdseed into is important. So these are a few of the things that I think are really significant. So going back before, talking about changing out that nectar, you know, having a feeder that is easy to clean and maintain is huge. If you've got feeders with like a really narrow neck on a bottle, it can be hard to get a brush down in there and clean. If you've got a feeder that has a whole bunch of grooves and ridges inside of it or threads, you know, it can be a little tricky to get in there and clean those, which is not to say it's impossible, but you know, you just need to know that your cleaning activity is going to require a little bit more time than with a more simply designed feeder. leak resistant. You know, this is great, you know, for a lot of reasons, not having your porch sticky being one of them, but also less likely to attract ants, you know, and just to make a mess in general. You did, you know, be all sticky when you go to take it out and clean it, and also just to lose your nectar. Appropriate size, you know, and again, this goes back to changing out the nectar. I mean, you shouldn't. There are very, very few people who need to put out hummingbird feeders that hold 24 ounces of liquid. You want the birds to be going through the nectar as quickly as possible. We sell more 8-ounce feeders than anything else. That seems to be the right size. So, you know, bigger is not always better. And with hummingbird feeders, that's certainly the case. Perches are not required. They're kind of nice though, because the birds will actually put their little legs there and stop to eat, drink nectar. They also, if you don't have one with perches, if you watch them, they will frequently fly up to a branch, and you can see them perching on a branch in your yard as well. So I sell some beautiful, beautiful bird feeders, some beautiful hummingbird feeders. And generally, you know, in my experience, there's a bit of a trade-off between aesthetics and function. The ones that are more functional are not quite as beautiful as the ones that are more aesthetically pleasing, which aren't quite as functional as the ones that are more boring. So dealing with pests. So the two primary pests when you're talking about hummingbird feeders are ants and bees and stinging insects. So ants are a little bit easier to deal with. There's something called an ant moat, which attaches between the feeder and the hook. You put water in it. Ants can't swim, and so they die in there. You just got to remember to keep that filled with water and to change it out. Interestingly enough, you know, our feeder birds will also go and drink out of those little cups. In my house, it's not at all uncommon to see a goldfinch or a chickadee perched on the edge of the ant moat having a little bit of a drink. The ones that I sell, many of the ones that I sell actually have an ant moat built into it, including the ones that were given away today. There's also some gels that have, I sell a gel that's got cinnamon oil in it. Ants hate it. So you put that gel around the pole and they won't climb over it. Of course, the issue with gels, a couple good hard rains, you got to reapply it, but that's not necessarily a huge deal. Bees and wasps are a little bit trickier. I sell some feeders that have bee guards on them, which I'll explain when we get to a picture, which enables the bird to get its tongue down in there, but doesn't really allow the nectar to come up so that the bees will tend to leave it alone. There are some other feeders that have sort of bee resistant ports as well. There are also some DIY things. If you end up with a real bee problem with a feeder that you can't really bee proof, sometimes putting sugar water in a little tiny dish near the feeder on the ground can help, or on a railing can help with a different concentration than what is in the hummingbird feeder. I'm not as well versed on some of these DIY things, but there are ways, and also moving the feeder. Sometimes you can end up with a lot of bee activity around a feeder because it's been placed inadvertently close to a nest. It seems that the bee issue is worse when it's drier than when we have summers where we have a little bit more rain and moisture. All right. So a couple of pictures to wrap up with, and then we'll have about 15 or so minutes for questions. So this is the feeder I was mentioning before. This is our biggest selling feeder. It's very simple. It's 2 pieces of molded plastic with the metal hook in the middle of it. So if you look on the picture on the right, you can see the bowl. And then inside of the bowl, that is a built-in ant moat. So that is where you would put your water. So you don't have to get an additional cup and hang it in between the hook and the other hook. Also, you will see that it's got a perch all the way around the ring there. That is an 8-ounce feeder. It's got 3 ports, which is more than enough for most people. Not everyone, but most people. And then on the right one, I don't know if you can see it, but the bottom protrusion there, so where the port comes through, we've actually placed one of those nectar guard defend tips on there. It's a little silicone nipple basically that slides over that protrusion on the underside of that feeder with a crosshatch cut in it, and that's what enables the bird to get its tongue down into the nectar, but doesn't really allow the bees to get in there to eat it. And of course, when bees get in there, they die. That's the real problem. And if it's honeybees, you definitely don't want that to happen. And any bugs that get in there will also taint the nectar. And this is one of the really beautiful hummingbird feeders that I mentioned before. The port is right in the middle of the flower with the little white dots around it. These are hand potted in New Mexico, but they can't be bee proofed. It's a little bit trickier to clean. We saw a lot of them, and our customers absolutely love them, but this is the trade-off that I was talking about before. And there we go. Questions?
Well, Scott, that was great. Thank you. And since we have about 60 folks on the call,
oh my goodness.
I know, right? You're a popular man. I would ask if we start with folks putting it in the chat, and then if there's folks who aren't comfortable putting in the chat, then we can take verbal questions. So I already have a couple of questions for you.
All right.
This one says, we get a very large number of hummingbirds to the feeder on our mountain cabin. However, we'll be gone for 2 to 3 weeks on vacation. Should we refrain from putting out the feeders until we return from vacation so as not to leave the hummers without food?
Okay, I'm sorry, Carolyn, I was once again having a technical issue and trying to get back to this screen.
Gotcha.
And so please repeat the question.
Sure. Janet asked, they said they have a large number of hummingbirds to come to the feeder at their mountain house. However, they're going to be gone for 2 to 3 weeks on vacation. Should they wait to put out the feeders until they return from vacation so as not to leave the hummers without food?
So I wouldn't worry about that in particular. We need to remember that the birds were here long before we showed up and started putting out feeders. They are well adapted to find their own food. If you don't put up the feeders, the birds will come and they will find their own food and be just fine. If you do put up your feeders, then I would just recommend not putting too much nectar in them, because what you really don't want is nectar sitting around for 2 or 3 weeks. If it's a little cooler, that's not as bad, right? If it's July, then that's different. But I might just put enough nectar in there. I don't know how big the feeders are, but not fill them up all the way, perhaps. But I don't ever worry about birds not being able to fend for themselves or being overly dependent. They'll be okay.
Okay, well, that's good advice. I would say that same for seed feeders for other birds, correct?
Sure, absolutely. I've got plenty of people who only feed in the wintertime. Mostly because of bears. I don't recommend that people only feed in the wintertime. I think that people should feed to the extent that they want to be able to see their birds. They're not harming them. At the same time, when you go on vacation and all your bird feeders go empty, and this happens to me, I still feel guilty when I get back. The birds will be fine, and then you put your feeders up, and it might take a little while to have a whole bunch of them show back up, but they show back up.
Got it. Okay. Audrey asks, what is in the cinnamon gel to get rid of ants? Would it work for countertops in the kitchen too to get rid of ants, or is it toxic to humans?
It's not toxic. It's cinnamon oil. Cinnamon oil is the main ingredient in that gel. I have anecdotal evidence. That was my timer to make me stop talking if I was running over. So I have anecdotal evidence, but it's only one person. So this person who used to work for me had an ant problem. And so she put the cinnamon gel along her windowsill, and she said it worked wonders.
So they never even came in. So it more as a
Never came.
barrier. It doesn't kill them. They just,
Yeah, they don't get stuck. They just hate it, and they don't want to cross over.
It's great to know what ants hate.
it.
Okay, Lucy asks, in addition to a good hummingbird feeder brush, how should a feeder be cleaned?
You know, you can, so some of these you can put into the dishwasher, like the one that I showed you, it can go in the dishwasher. I just use mild soapy water and warm water and rinse it. If you want to do a deeper clean, you can do a 10% bleach solution and soak it, and just be sure you rinse it out really carefully. I have a lot of customers who use vinegar as a cleaner as well. It's a very effective cleaner.
Great. Nancy asks, what's the time difference between the arrival here and northern locations like New England for, I'm assuming, the ruby-throated hummingbird?
You know, one of the things that I have learned by taking over this job is that there's a lot of questions that I don't know the answer to. And I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you. I just don't. I don't know if there's a huge difference or not. But I mean, you know, there are folks spotting hummingbirds, I think down southern North Carolina and South Carolina around now. There are maps out there that you, if you do like, if you type in hummingbird migration 2022, usually you can find a map or two where citizen scientists are reporting that they are seeing hummingbirds, and then that they pin them on the map. So you can kind of track for yourself and see where they're being seen.
That's very exciting, isn't it? Well, great use of technology to be able to do that. Kind of get your anticipatory, you know, juices flowing. All right, let's see. Judy says, last year we saw hummingbirds with something hanging from its leg. I read it could be nesting material. Is that so?
I'm sure it could be nesting material. You know, I used to sell, this is a broader comment. I mean, I used to sell like alpaca threads and things like that to help with nesting material. And then sometimes you'll find dog hair in birds' nests, and not hummingbirds' nests. I'm talking about nests in general. I don't sell any of the nesting material stuff. We just let the birds sort of find the stuff that's in nature and to build their own nest. So I don't know if the hummingbird might have had something that was not natural, that was nesting material that was on its leg. I mean, I hope it came off. If it was flying, then it's probably okay, but I don't know.
Okay. Donna asks, are the hummingbirds curious creatures?
Oh yeah, so they are, and they're kind of fearless. So I mean, if you love hummingbirds, you've probably seen the videos on YouTube with people with these hats with the little feeders, and the hummingbirds will just come up. I don't know if it's, you know, I don't know if it's curiosity in the sense that we understand curiosity so much as it is, I see something that looks like it might have nectar, and I'm going to go see. And just that level of fearlessness. I mean, you can put a little feeder in your hand, and as long as you're very still, and we recommend wearing sunglasses so the birds can't see the movement of your eyes, the hummingbirds will come right up and eat out of your hand. It takes a little training, but I've had plenty of customers who've been successful with that. I mean, I had a red hat one time. The hummingbird just flew right up to the hat.
Nice. Here's a great, Kathy says, a friend of mine had a Rufous hummingbird stay all through the winter in Charlottesville. She would use a toothpick to clear the holes in the feeder so there was access to food during freezing temps. Have you ever heard of this before?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the Rufous hummingbird, you know, that's a long time for one to stick around, but I have heard of that before. And, you know, there are actually some hummingbird feeders out there that have heaters built into them, is my understanding. I mean, obviously I don't sell them because it's just generally not an issue in this part of the world. But yeah, I mean, so that's yeoman's work, going out there with a pick to break the ice so that the hummingbird can get its nectar. I think also, it is an exemplar of just how incredibly resilient these birds are. I mean, for a little tiny bird like that to be here when it's really not supposed to be, and to be okay for that long, and hopefully it moved on in its southerly migration at some point, is remarkable. I mean, a bird that is a teeny tiny bird that feeds off of nectar, and there's no nectar around and few bugs. So I think in this instance, as I say, most of the time we're just supplementing a bird's diet. But if you've got a rufous hummingbird here in like December or January, you're probably keeping it alive with that feeder.
That's must be extraordinary. Phyllis asked, okay to put the feeder in the dishwasher or not? I know you addressed that a little bit. I guess you would have to read the.
Yeah, I would read the instructions. The only other thing is, I think sometimes even if it says you can put it in the dishwasher, you can end up with clouding of the clear plastic parts of the feeders. I mean, that one that I showed is so easy to clean. I wouldn't worry about putting it in a feeder. I mean, in a dishwasher. Now, some of the glass ones, like the glass bottle ones, might not be a bad idea to put it in there to clean those. And of course, glass is fine. But the plastic ones, if it says you can put it in the dishwasher, then sure. But it will cause fading on the red parts, and it will eventually cause clouding on the clear parts.
Okay. Judy writes that cinnamon oil can be toxic to cats, though. So that's good information.
Yeah. So I appreciate her saying that. I wasn't aware of that.
Carolyn said, I'm from New York, and to answer the previous question, so this is up in New York, they would show up in May.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. So just a little bit after us.
Here's one I really want to know the answer to. When hummingbirds do body slams with each other, do they get hurt?
When they what?
They body slam each other. You've seen them.
So I am just going to confess that I have not personally seen that. I've seen a lot of close calls. My best guess is that they're not hurting themselves. I mean, but in the wild, these sort of displays of territorial behavior are designed. One is designed to scare the other off and establish dominance, but there isn't a lot of there's no good reason to do something that hurts yourself or the other bird. So I'm kind of extrapolating a little bit, but my guess, I would be surprised if they were doing anything that actually caused them harm.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that's it for the questions in the chat at this point. What I think it would be great to do is to do the drawing. And then if you're willing to stay around, I'll unmute those that are left on the call who want to maybe ask you verbally a question for the next 5 or 10 minutes. Would that work for you, Scott?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Oh, do the birds have natural predators? That's another question just came in.
They do. I don't think that they have many natural predators here, but for instance, a very large praying mantis can actually capture a hummingbird. But I don't, it's not as though a Cooper's hawk or a sharp-shinned hawk is going to be able to get a hummingbird.
Yeah, I guess they give them a run for their money. All right, well, I've got everybody's name in it's not a hat, it's a bin. All right, and the first person, let's see if they're still on the call. I want to make sure they're still on the call. Okay, let's see. Edith McHenry. Edith McHenry, you win a hummingbird feeder and the kind of nectar that Scott was talking about. Congratulations, and I'm going to pick another name. And thank you for doing that, Scott.
Oh, sure.
And we've got, let's see. No, okay. Karen, just Karen. somebody named Karen. So that's those two folks. If you want to stay on, and I'll get your information, or you know what, you can just come and pick it up at the center. I'll have your name on it, and it'll be at the front desk. So Karen, whoever has their name is Karen, and then Edith McHenry. Congratulations. So, all right, now what I'll do is allow everybody to unmute themselves. So give me a second. I have to click, and there we go. Oh, can you put up your business address? That was
I'm typing it now. And here's the thing. So boring, but when my store used to be where Lane Bryant is. And so they divided Lane Bryant into 2 stores, which means that my address is brand new. So I'm telling you this because I'm not sure it's going to show up in your GPS. All right. So I'm going to delete that part where I was trying to explain this in words, and I'm just going to put it up there. So the address is 810 29th Place Court.
okay. Kind of near where the shoe store is, designer shoe.
Right next to DSW and Firehouse Sub. So if you're looking at the Staples Shopping Center, we're all the way on the right of that main shopping center.
Great. So I've allowed folks to unmute themselves. So if you want to ask a question, please do that. And you're getting lots of thanks for this presentation.
Oh, good. Well, it's my pleasure. I will say, and I'm delighted to answer questions. One nice thing about that nectar is that the math is easy. It's 1 scoop of nectar per 1 cup of water.
That works for me.
pretty convenient ratio.
Phyllis, would you like to ask a question?
Actually, I'm just remembering you already answered it. It had to do with the dishwasher versus hand washing. And so you answered it beautifully, but Scott, thank you so much.
Sure.
And Carolyn, thank you too. This was really, really helpful and enjoyable. Thank you.
Aw.
Thanks.
I think we're all ready for spring, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Aw. Anyone else? You can just go ahead and unmute yourselves and shout it out.
And it can be about hummingbirds or anything else. You're going to get a better answer if it's related to birds than some other topics. But with that caveat, I'm happy to answer questions about anything.
I had a lone bluebird at my feeder a couple of weeks ago. That bird has not returned. And so I've never put out mealworms, but is that an important thing that I could be doing?
So I get this question a lot. And what's wonderful about bluebirds, people think that they only eat mealworms or that that's what they want to eat more than anything else. And the fact is, like most birds, they're omnivorous and they love sunflower seeds. So bluebirds love sunflower seeds. Now, they have a hard time opening the shells, right? So if you were to get sunflower seeds that don't have the shells on them, they will be attracted to that. They like suet. They don't really cling on suet feeders, but if you can get like suet balls that can be mixed in with bird food, and you won't be surprised to hear I sell all this stuff, they like that as well. Now, once we get into the breeding season, they really do like live, and I sell dried mealworms too. So I do like a mixture in my feeders, dried mealworms, suet, and seeds that don't have shells on it, and nuts. Once we get into the breeding season, they really like live mealworms. And I sell those as well. You keep them in the fridge, and then when you take them out of the fridge, they kind of wake up, and a couple of teaspoonfuls in a little dish. They like the live mealworms to feed their chicks. Right, it's a highly nutritious, easily digestible form of food for the chicks. So that's the thing. So we're getting into the season where I'll be selling lots and lots and lots and lots of live mealworms. But remember, they really like sunflower seeds.
Great. Well, thanks. I'll be in to see you.
Good.
I have a question.
Claudia, sure.
We have what I call a bluebird house in my yard, and the bluebirds come. They're already there visiting, And within a few weeks, the tree swallows will come and they will knock them out and they won't be there. Any advice how to prevent that from happening, or there's nothing I can do about it?
You know, the good news is that at least tree swallows are a native, I mean, they're migratory, but they're a native species. You know, normally we hear issues about house sparrows, the European sparrows, which are an invasive species and are particularly devastating for bluebird boxes and vicious. You know, I guess the one thing that I would try would be to put up another box, you know, that way.
2 boxes available.
There are 2 boxes available, and the swallows take over both of them, or does one just remain unused?
Yeah, I haven't tried 2 yet.
Oh, you haven't tried to? Yeah,
No.
I mean, that's what I would, you know, if the swallows are consistently moving into one, then I would try a second box that is at some distance from the first one, and see how that does. I mean,
Okay.
because then, I mean, if you end up with a situation where you've got swallows, which I love, they're great birds, swallows and bluebirds, then you're in the catbird seat, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, that would be good. Thank you.
Karen, who also won the prize, said, please tell Scott he had 2 future hummingbird lovers, ages 6 and 3, plus their mothers and their 98-year-old grandmother watching. We had a wonderful time and it was very informative.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. And I will say, one of the things I like about our store is we get all kinds of folks in there from all different demographics, from your older folks down to your younger ones. I love them all. And it is very heartening to me when we've got people coming in with kids, you know, because we live in an era where there are just so many distractions for young people. You know, this is like my little thing, a lot of them related to technology, that I think there needs to be a certain level of intentionality for those of us who are a little bit older or who are parenting to encourage younger folks and to help them know that there's remarkable beauty and interesting things out there in nature, and getting folks started early is key to that, I think. Not the same as when I was a kid. You know, when I was a kid, you stayed outside. You know, I mean, I wonder sometimes how many kids are saying to their, you know, how many parents are saying to the kids, you can stay out until the streetlights come on. You know,
Right.
That's what it was like when I was young.
And then you played flash tag, yeah. Flashlight tag. And Carolyn Schomer commented, which I love about Zoom because we can do this. We can comment with each other. I have swallows and bluebirds every year in houses only about 20 feet apart.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so that's right. Swallows and bluebirds don't have a problem nesting, you know, close to each other. Bluebird boxes, you know, if you've got more than one set of bluebirds that want to nest, you know, 50 to 100 yards apart or not in eyesight, line of vision is good. But yeah, swallows and bluebirds will nest close together. That's right.
Right. Anybody else? Feel free to unmute or put a question in the chat. This has been great. I'm getting really excited. Okay, well, I think we're done. Thank you again, Scott. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for joining us. It's lovely to see you. And I know I don't see everybody's faces, but it's just really nice to have you here at the center.
Entirely my pleasure. And thanks to everyone for coming.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
And yes, Karen, pick up the feeder at the center. Yes.
All right, Carolyn, I'll talk to you later.
Okay.